Hey, what's up guys? This is Will Lavalier with a quick cut-in tutorial for 04C bass. Most likely you are stuck at this part of the tutorial where we need to try and take these corner pieces that we've made and transfer them into this path. This is in order to try and make a sort of circular archway type, circular fountain essentially, circular wall. But the main issue is that he uses containers, he uses pathways, and he uses a lot of tools that primarily make this work in 2010 3ds Max. But in 2017, this is very difficult to replicate what he does. So instead, what we've decided to do is instead of getting a sort of archway circular type deal, we're just going to go with square. We're going to go with a quick square, and if I can, so essentially when you're done with this tutorial, you're aiming for this design. You want to get these corners, obviously, and then instead of an archway, you go in square. And then once you have that square, you can pretty much follow along with him and get back along with his route. But if you want to finish base, I'll probably show that too. So I'll go back to tutorial, and so let's start off with here. So you're here, right? We're pretty much just going to delete these. We don't need them. We're going to select this corner, this whole corner, and we're going to drag it out. Shift, drag it out. You want to get around here. And then we'll make it an instance so that any details you add later to any of this will be able to be replicated across all of it very quickly. And now I'm going to show you guys a quick tip for moving things around easy. What we're aiming to do is we want to take this little bit of corner and we want to match it up to here, and I'll show you why in a minute. But so if we click X and we move around with it, we hold it, you can actually go back in, hold it again, and it slides only on the X. It's a very useful tool to have. It's extremely good for sort of precise axis movement, as I call it. We can do the same thing for the Y. Move and drag. And be very careful with this too, by the way. You can see this is 2017, by the way. So you can see it's kind of flickering between this and this, these arrows and this sort of crosshair style thing. You do not want the crosshair, because what happens if I use the crosshair, it selects that one piece. If I use this movement, these arrows, I can actually use the movement, but it flickers constantly, so you can't just be, basically you have to be very careful with how this runs. And you want to do the same thing for over here, getting this corner out. Instance X. Get that all matched up. Now for this, we also want Y, but we want this whole middle section to actually be matched up horizontally. So we'll go this way, get that just matched up. It doesn't entirely matter. It's probably better to have deviation, but not like this. It would need to be a variation that's actually intended across the whole thing, like a real pattern. So now we have this, and there's several problems to work on as we continue into this. Turn off edged faces. So there are actually three main problems, just two of them kind of feed into each other. We need to severely clean the back of this up. You can see obviously it looks fine from the front, and that's important, but you just can't do that. You gotta optimize whenever you can. Like these objects back here aren't even being seen. You can't do that. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to clean this whole corner up. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take these three things out. And obviously you just saw I took these two little like brick segments, took those out as well, and we'll be dealing with each row as I get to them. First we're going to be dealing with this top one. Go to modifiers, and you can see these. You see how these are boldened? Remember what I just talked about with instances earlier? So we need to go into here and we need to make unique. And that allows us to modify this without messing with anything here. So like this is still an instance, so if I went to here and I said mirror, you can see that's affecting everything. We don't want that. We would have to make it a unique, just like we've done with here. So now that this is unique, we're gonna go into symmetry. We're gonna make another symmetry modifier, and we're just gonna mess around with the mirror. Get that to 45 degrees about. And angle snap helps a lot with this. And then we're gonna move the mirror back, and you can see it's kind of not in position correctly. So we're gonna flip it. And this is what's very, very important with getting those corners matched up, is that now this part is super easy because they're pretty much proportioned to each other automatically. It just fits nicely. Very, very good. And so now it's just cleanup detail. So we're gonna create an edit poly modifier. We're gonna place that below the symmetry. We're going to go into vertex mode, and as I'm sure you've already been dealing with this whole time, it's pretty much just cleaning. So we're going to turn on edged faces. We're going to turn these on, drag these in. Kind of like zipping up the model, if you want to think of it like a hoodie or something. Just zip up the model and be kind of careful, because I was having trouble with these polygons earlier, but it looks like they're doing fine just now already. Take these three in, really zip it up. And just for the sake of cleanliness, I'm just being neat here. Take that in. The interior already looks a lot better than if you just try to use 4. It's like, come on. So now we just have this top part. Everyone's top part will be a lot different, just because I'm sure we're all making it differently. I know I've seen like 1,000 different completely different issues of rise from trying to do this, because everyone will make this differently. But essentially, we want to drag this in. And especially since you have symmetry modifier, you don't have to be completely precise with the polygons. Like I'll turn off symmetry. These are all over the place, but it doesn't matter. It looks nice with the symmetry on, so it doesn't fully matter. So now that's all good. Now we're gonna go to this layer, and you can see, yeah, sure, it looks good, but at the same time, it really doesn't. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to delete that, make sure that's all good. You just want this one corner piece, and similar to what we just did, we're going to make unique, make a symmetry modifier, make sure that any turbo smooth you have, any turbo smooth is always at the top. It should always be the last thing you do. We're going to go to symmetry, mirror, 45, doesn't look like it's the right way. That can always be fixed with, it's just flip. And you can already see it looks a lot better. It actually flows well. It actually works well. And you can just zip it right in. And it actually has this really nice blend to it that you wouldn't have had if you just mashed 2 of these things together. Very important to try and get. And you can see I'm just looking around to make sure that this actually flows well. That's all good. Now we're going to go to these bricks. This should be fairly easy by now. We're going to go into these bricks. We're going to remove this one. Make unique. Edit poly. Actually, no. Yeah, symmetry, my bad. Go and take a symmetry. Make sure that that's below turbo smooth. Mirror. 45. Flip it. And you can always just play around with these to make sure that it's the way you want. I've said this a lot recently, but 3ds Max, once you really understand your tools and you really understand what's happening, it's really just Play-Doh. It doesn't really matter. So now I'm just going in and I'm making sure that spacing is right. Yeah, it looks about fine. So now that corner already looks a lot better. And because of how this bottom row is, this very bottom row, we'll deal with that toward the end. But for now, we just want these corner pieces dealt with, because now we can go over to this corner, and instead of dealing with that again, we can actually just go over here. And I'll explain why, because it actually would be technically more efficient to just do the symmetry thing, but it's also better to just use what you already have. So you saw I just did an instance clone, and that'll come in handy later when you're doing a sort of when you're putting rims on these things. It's worth the effort instead of going through 1,000 different things and doing the same thing, to just have 1,000 things be the same thing. So we're doing that. Take these out. Get our corner piece, drag that over, make sure it's shift, make an instance. And he talks about this in the video too. It's also good to have instances because essentially 3ds Max, instead of reading 1,000 different objects, it just reads the same object over and over again in order to optimize a lot of its speed. And so it actually is a lot more efficient to just read off of an instance rather than 1,000 different objects. So we'll go into here. I have a pretty awkward spacing right now, so I'm just going in, just making sure it at least looks good. Looks fine. We'll go into bricks, take these out, get that corner piece, instance, rotate, nope, rotate, get that nice in there. Looks pretty good. And so now that these corners are dealt with, we're going to go into this middle section. This middle section probably will cause the most annoyance. But what I just take the simple route. Delete this. Symmetry. We're going to make this unique. We are going to... What do I want to do here? There are a couple ways to do this. I could edit poly. Nope, that's an edit mesh, my bad. We could edit poly and just take these polygons, move them out. Or we could also just do the mirror. The mirror might not work for everyone. That's why I showed the edit poly. Like right here. It doesn't entirely work for me unless I go into edit poly at the very bottom, really extract this thing down. So I show the symmetry, drag this in, looks nice. Drag it out just a little just to get the spacing right. It doesn't fully matter. It's probably better to have sort of small little deviations in the spacing between these just for a nice stylish effect. We're going to do the same thing on the brick row. We're going to go down here, we're going to make unique, we're going to do editable poly, show, and we can actually, this is just how I spaced it, but you can actually see it's following this sort of line, and that's actually from this thing. It's actually coming from here, but this is all following the grid on a very, very tight basis. So I can actually just go in, and I'm pressing G to toggle the grid, by the way. We can actually just go in, use symmetry, and now we can use that mirror tool again. It just gets it very nice, very efficient way of dealing with this. You need to find very clean-cut ways of doing this, otherwise you'll find that if you ever try to actually use this outside of 3ds Max, it just becomes a nightmare. And this is already a high poly model. You can't afford nightmares. So for this piece, what I do is I just shift, create a copy, and that you can see that already makes it, makes unique. It is unique, it's copy. Go to front view just to get a nice equal view, mirror, and we want to move this just so that left side is dealt with. Go to mirror, shrink it in just a little. It's pretty good. So now we have all this stuff. There are a couple things we still need to do. We need to deal with this bottom row. That should be number one priority. Because of how these bottom rows are built in the first place, you can actually just deal with them in a pretty simple way. Unfortunately, because they're all in different positions, they don't really need to be instances. These are, at the end of the day, these are pretty much just squares compared to the rest of this stuff. It's small detail, but these are all in different locations and they need to be different distances, and it becomes this whole mess. So let's see. What I'm going to do is I'm going to delete turbo smooth off of all of these while this is still an instance, and you can see that removes from all of it. I'm just going to do the simplest way I know. I'm just going to convert to editable poly, drag it in, etc. And then I need to make sure that this end is also dealt with. So I'll pretty much, I don't really need these. I'll go into here, make sure that's all good. Take the polygon tool, just get it just right into there. So that's all good. Pretty much just do the same thing across the board. Convert that to a polygon, space. Now, you can see me trying to do this. That's a small issue. You could technically use symmetry here, because these sides should be equal anyway. So that's what I'm going to be doing for this. You don't have to, but you could, and it's just a nice way of doing it. So we're going to select this, symmetry. You see the mirror is a bit weird. Looks like it's based on the y-axis. No, it is. Yeah, we want it on the y-axis. So we're gonna go into here. All right, what? Alright, my bad. I'm moving this around. I'm being kind of an idiot with this stuff. We want to make sure the mirror is actually selected, and then we'll move this so that it's actually doing what we want. And you can see 90 degrees on the X, and it's actually doing what we want. So now it's just a matter of space. So we want to make sure it lands about there. We want to make sure this is here. We're going to bring this out. And don't worry about the spacing, we'll deal with that in a second. But we want to go into back view. We can actually see what's happening. No, we can't, never mind. It's good times. Go into here, just bring it in a little. Again, it's all eyeballing. Measurements don't matter for the most part. If you're doing construction work, you wouldn't want to be 3D modeling with like several inches off, but it doesn't really matter. Go into editable poly, show end result, take these polygons, just drag that in, it meets, it's all good. It's a very clean way of doing this. Then we'll go into this last one, just very basic, editable poly, just bring this in, bring this out actually. It's all good. Alright, that's pretty much it. Oh, if you want to do those rims, which are shown after he makes the archway type deal, you can, I guess I'll show you that in a second. Edit. No, we want to make sure we actually selecting what we want. So remember how I said about instances, we can actually go into here and we can actually turn Turbo Smooth on. So we'll take Turbo Smooth, or you might already have it on, but just make sure it's on and make sure that it's at the very top, otherwise you get some weird visual glitches and it causes some issues. Sometimes it actually just works fine, but sometimes it doesn't. We'll turn that off for now. See how I keep it in there using this eye. Go to editable poly, show end result, and what we want to do is we want to go to edit, take a Swift Loop. Swift Loop might be somewhere else. I've seen people have like different menus. I've seen Swift Loop be all the way over here. This is my preferred layout. It's fine. It's whatever you choose at the end of the day. And we want to make a Swift Loop right about halfway, kind of a halfway point here at the very top. So we'll make a Swift Loop. And then we want to take these polygons. Oh, can I not? Please? There you go. Take these polygons, however you have it set it up. Then you want to extrude them. I do about 6 or 7, maybe 5 at the very least, but I would do about 6. 6.4 sounds good. But make sure you remember this number, because we're going to do this on this here. We're going to do it on those instances we made in the middle. You want to make sure you remember this number. So what we'll actually do is we'll just do 6. Easier to remember an int than a double. And then we can turn Turbo Smooth back on, and you can see it's definitely missing that hard edge that we definitely need. So what we'll do instead is we'll go back, we'll turn Turbo Smooth off, go into Edit, Swift Loop, and we'll just experiment around. There are 2 options to this. There's putting it straight in the middle, just not really caring, and it gets you kind of a hard edge, but it kind of wastes extruding it that far, so we won't do that. And what we'll instead do is 2 hard edges, one right at the very top. Let me just zoom in a bit. Right at the very top. And again, it's just eyeballing. And then one at the very bottom, and this forces Turbo Smooth to be like, oh, I can't grow there, I can't do that. And next thing you know, you have just these very nice rims across, but you can see it's not on the corners and it's not on this middle section. It's not on these corners either. Thankfully we have instances, so you can see this is instance, so we'll turn Turbo Smooth off. That affects this, and this. That affects all 4, so that's good. You might have this layout in terms of slices. You might have this completely different from me. But what you're aiming for is swift loops pretty much here, and then grabbing all the polygons here and extruding it out by 6, as we just said. So we'll go to symmetry, we're going to go to editable poly, show end result, edit swift loop. Is swift loop not on? It's weird. Oh, it's the wrong side. It might be on a different side. So we can kind of match this up. Again, it's just eyeballing. It's probably better to eyeball from this range, because if you want to notice the details, you're making these details for a player to notice. This isn't for you to notice. This is for a player. So if you're noticing it from this range, this is the range where a player might see it. So it's sometimes better to actually view from a long distance and then model from a long distance and be like, oh, it looks good from a long distance, and then the player can only see it from a long distance. It's a kind of a key thing that I like to try, and it's a key principle I like to try and follow. So we'll go into here, we have this whole section, and we're still in editable poly on the most basic level. But basically we're trying to grab all these polygons, and thankfully I have symmetry on, so it's kind of like saving yourself half a step, really. Then we'll extrude it out. We said 6. That's all good. Edit swift loop. Get that right in there. Perfect. And now we'll turn Turbo Smooth back on. You can see these corner pieces are pretty much all fixed. It's really good. Finally, we just have this left. And again, everyone's is different. I just want to make sure that this. I thought I saw a glitch. What is this? Oh, okay. No. It's just symmetry. It's all good. So pretty much this is all set up. This is a bit more complicated because we want to get all of this properly dealt with, but at the same time, it's not really that complicated. So we can go into here, go to editable poly. Let's see. Yeah, editable poly right there. Then we'll go into swift loop, and we'll actually just eyeball it again, get it right there. And you can see, because of symmetry and how I set this up, it's all good. So we can select polygon, take this, and pretty much just grab whatever side you symmetried from, and just get that whole area. Then extrude by 6, and then we'll editable poly, or no, swift loop, my bad. Swift loop. It's all good. Then we'll turn off that mode. And you can see it's still an instance, so that one over there is still being affected. So I can turn on Turbo Smooth. It's all good. And you can see this one is also just completely fine. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Turn off edge face. Oh, my bad. Middle. Forgot. Go into here. You can see it's its own piece, really. So we'll turn on Turbo Smooth. Turn that off for a second. Go to editable poly. Swift loop. Should be very, very simple to understand by now. Turn that on. Polygon. Extrude. A 6 or whatever number you decided to go with. Go into here, swift loop, turns Turbo Smooth back on, and it looks very consistent, looks very nice, and it's not wasting any details. What? Okay. Oh, my bad. Nope, never mind. Editable poly. We'll turn Turbo Smooth off for a second. Oh, that's why. You can see when I turn Turbo Smooth on for this corner piece, it actually read polygons differently, I guess. It's very strange. But we now have a hole in here. That's just a quick fix. We go into editable poly, turn turbo smooth off, make sure end result is shown. What the? Drag this in a bit farther. Maybe I just did it too far. Maybe you don't even have this problem. That's great. But yeah, on the y-axis, to bring that in, it forces turbo smooth to read it. Maybe I was just a little too precise, you know. It's great. But yeah, that's just about it. You know, have this all set up. Nice coat of rims. Corner pieces all properly built on all sides. And you can now continue along with the tutorials. This has been William Valier. I hope you enjoyed this talk. And see you guys later.